They came in at 0211 hours. 3 trucks, lights off, moving along the eastern fence line through the ponderosa pines the way they had moved every November for the past 4 years. No hesitation, no whisper. Cutter Briggs didn't bother to lower his voice. He never had on this land, because this land had never had anyone on it worth worrying about. Same as always, he said. In, out, gone before dawn. The property was dark. The ranch house sat 3/4 of a mile back from the tree line. Windows black, no vehicle in the drive. The woman who had bought the place, some city girl, someone in town had said, or military, nobody was entirely sure, had been seen around the county twice and had not made a particular impression on anyone. She was not in the house. Spread out, Cutter said. Let's get to work. The first shot came 2 seconds later. Nobody saw where it came from. Before we go any further, hit that subscribe button right now and stay with me until the very last word. Drop a comment telling me what city you are watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel, because what happens next on that ranch, you will not believe it. Her name was Nora Vance. If you had seen her the morning she drove through the gate of the Harmon property for the first time as its owner, a used truck, a single canvas duffel in the bed, no moving van following behind, you might have assumed she had taken a wrong turn somewhere. She was 38 years old, 5'5", quiet in the way that does not announce itself as anything. She wore her dark hair short, and she looked at the crumbling fence posts and the buckled barn roof and the overgrown track leading to a house that had not been properly inhabited since the late 90s, with the expression of someone cataloging rather than regretting. The ranch had been on the market for 11 years. 3 buyers before her had made offers and walked away. The roof needed replacing. The well needed red drilling. The east pasture had gone feral for so long, it was closer to wilderness than working land. The county assessor had explained, in the tone of someone trying to be kind about a bad situation, that the property was priced the way it was because the market had expressed its opinion clearly and repeatedly. The land was simply not worth what land is supposed to be worth. She had written the check anyway. She spent her first week fixing fence, not hiring someone, not calling around for quotes. She was out before first light with post hole diggers and wire, and the kind of methodical patience that does not think of itself as patience because it has never named itself anything at all. It simply works until the work is done and then moves to the next job. The neighbor to the north, a rancher named Gil Pruitt, who had watched the Harmon place sit empty for over a decade, drove past twice before he stopped. He leaned out of his truck window and looked at the line she had already set. He said nothing. He drove on. On the inside of her left wrist, below the cuff of her work glove, there was a tattoo, 4 small black digits, a coordinate rendered in plain numerals so ordinary they could have been anything. Nobody in the county thought to ask what it meant. She had not offered. Cutter Briggs came to see her on the 9th day. He drove a clean black pickup with a chrome gun rack and a county commissioner sticker on the rear window, the sticker that communicated exactly what it was intended to communicate in a place like this. He was 44 years old, wide through the chest and shoulders, with the manner of a man who had spent a very long time being the answer to questions that other people did not know how to ask. He had hunted the Harmon property for 4 seasons under a handshake arrangement with the previous listing agent, the kind of arrangement that doesn't get written down because it doesn't need to be. He pulled up to where Nora was working and left the engine running. Heard someone finally bought the place, he said through the window. Affable. Easy. Cutter Briggs. My family's been in this county since before that road out there was paved. Nora set down her wire cutters. Nora Vance, she said. Listen, he smiled. The particular smile of a man who had learned that smiling while delivering hard news makes the news land softer. I've been running deer on this property for going on 4 years now. Nobody minded. I managed the herd. Keep my side of the fence line clear. Run off outside trespassers when I see them. Good arrangement for everyone. He paused. I'd like to keep it going if that works for you. It doesn't, she said. The smile did not disappear. It adjusted. I don't think you understand how things tend to work around. I understand exactly how things work, she said. She picked up her wire cutters. You have been trespassing on private land. That ends now. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he put the truck in drive. You're going to find, he said through the open window, that it's a very lonely county when you make enemies before you make friends, little lady. He left. 10 days later, 3 of her fence posts on the eastern line were cut clean through. A field-dressed mule deer carcass was left hanging from her east gate, a message written in the language of men who assume the person receiving it will not know what to do with it. Gil Pruitt called her that evening. "Cutter's been talking in town," he said. "Says you'll be gone before spring. Says you don't know what you bought into." A pause. "I'm not saying he's right. I thought you ought to know what's being said." She thanked him. She stood at the kitchen window and looked at the eastern fence line in the dark. She started preparing. She had not ended up at this ranch by plan. She had ended up here by road trip and pie and grief, in that order, during a solo drive west 3 years after leaving the Navy that she could not have explained clearly at the time. She had stopped at a diner in a small county seat and eaten the best lemon meringue pie she had ever been given, and sat at the counter while an old rancher named Harmon, 81 years old, ranching alone since his wife passed, talked about his property going to seed. He was not looking for a buyer. He was looking for someone to be honest with. He talked about the east pasture and the deer coming through the ponderosa pines on the north slope every November, the same patterns year after year. And he talked about it the way people talk about things they are losing without knowing the exact moment the losing began. She had left her number on a napkin. When the listing came through 2 years later, she had stared at it for a long time and then called the number and bought it in a single conversation. She bought it for herself. And she bought it, though she would not have said this to anyone still living, for Chief Warrant Officer Dale Stokes. Stokes had been her team leader for 6 years. He was from Cody, Wyoming, had grown up on a cattle operation, and spent his early 20s trying to get as far from it as physically possible, then spent the following decade and a half missing it in a way he could never completely suppress. He talked about land, the way people talk about things they gave up and cannot stop reaching back toward. "Somewhere nobody knows your name," he used to say, running a cleaning rod through his rifle in the quiet before a mission, "and the sky goes all the way down to the ground." He said it like a plan, something for when the work was finished, and there was time for everything else. He was killed by a vehicle-borne IED on a secondary road outside Al-Hasaka, Syria, in March of 2021. The convoy was moving at 40 miles per hour. The device had been positioned for a different unit and found the wrong vehicle. He died before the second truck in the convoy had time to stop. She had been on overwatch. 800 meters. She had seen the smoke. She left the service 14 months later. Not with anger, not with ceremony, with the specific quiet of a person who has spent completely what they had to give and now needs to find out what is left. What was left turned out to be considerable. 11 years of service, 3 deployments, a sniper qualification she had earned at the top of her class and never stopped maintaining, the particular analytical composure of someone who has operated in situations that required thinking with full precision at the exact moment when thinking was the only thing keeping people alive, a complete absence of sentimentality about physical discomfort, an equally complete absence of fear of solitude, and a Remington M24 in a hard case under her bed that she cleaned every 2 weeks without fail. She had never stopped being what she was. She had simply stopped doing it for a salary. The 2 weeks after Cutter's dead deer message, she spent preparing, not visibly, not in any way a truck passing on the county road would register. She walked her fence lines every morning before first light, mapping the perimeter the way she had mapped positions in the Euphrates River Valley, methodically, from the ground, noting sight lines and cover in the approach angles that a person moving in darkness would naturally take. She identified 3 probable entry points along the eastern fence where the ponderosa pines came closest to the wire and the ground gave the most concealment. She marked each on a hand-drawn sketch she kept in the kitchen drawer under a seed catalog. She installed 3 motion-activated trail cameras at positions along the eastern approach that were not visible from the fence itself, weatherproof units, cell-enabled, capable of sending an alert to her phone the moment anything larger than a coyote moved through the frame. She knew the coverage geometry by memory. She could have drawn it in the dark without error. She identified her primary overwatch position, a low limestone ridge on the north slope, 340 meters from the most likely entry point, with unobstructed sightlines across the full eastern approach. She ranged it twice in daylight and once at night to understand what the terrain, shadow, and available moonlight would give her. She memorized every number. She did not share any of this with anyone. On the 14th night, at 23:40 hours, her phone vibrated on the nightstand. Camera 1. Motion detected. She was out of bed in 30 seconds. Dressed in 45, she moved to the ridge without a light and without making any sound. The terrain was not already making. The temperature was 28 degrees. She had held position in the Zagros Mountains at -17 in a sustained wind off the elevation, with nothing between her and the cold but a ghillie wrap, and she had stayed on that position for 6 hours without moving, and made 3 confirmed shots at the end of it. 45 minutes and 28 degrees still air on a limestone ridge was not discomfort. It was Tuesday. At 23:57 hours, she keyed her radio. Sheriff Ellis Warren answered on the second ring. 61 years old, 3 years from retirement, running a 2-deputy county that had not seen a significant incident in 4 years. He was, in her estimation, a careful and fair man who had formed a quiet opinion about her capacity to manage her property that was not hostile, but was best described as measured. "I have 3 vehicles entering my eastern fence line," she said. "They are on camera. I am in position on the ridge. I need you at my east gate in 40 minutes. A pause. "You're sure?" Cutter Briggs has operated in this county a long time. His family has 4 years of trespass on property that now belongs to me, documented on camera, she said. "Tonight will be documented as well. Please be at the east gate." She heard him breathe. "I'll be there," he said. She ended the call and went back to her scope. They were moving in a spread formation. 2 on the northern approach, using the tree line for cover, 1 working the wire directly, and Cutter Briggs taking the center line through the open pasture with a bolt-action rifle not yet unslung from his shoulder. 4 total. She had been expecting 3. She adjusted her count and updated her tracking accordingly. She had ranged the primary approach at 340 meters, in stable air with the quarter moon at her angle and wind from the northwest reading under 3 miles per hour. She was operating at better than 94% of optimal conditions. Her confirmed long shot had been 1,100 meters in a 20-knot crosswind at altitude on a target that was not stationary, made on the second controlled breath with a single round. 340 meters in near still air was not a problem to be solved. It was a conversation to be had. She waited. She waited the way she had always waited, without the waiting feeling like effort, without the silence pressing, without the cold registering as more than data to be noted and filed. A survival school instructor had told her class once that the difference between a trained operator and a skilled civilian marksman was almost never the shot itself. It was the patience before the shot. The difficult shots, he had said, are difficult because someone fired before the conditions were right. The conditions are always coming. Your job is to still be there when they arrive. She was still there. At 0211 hours, Cutter Briggs walked into the center of the east pasture with his rifle on his shoulder, moving like a man who owned a place he did not own, and said at full voice, "Same as always. In, out, gone before dawn." He was 318 meters from her position. She waited 6 more seconds. Then she fired. The round went into the ground 6 inches in front of Cutter's right boot, precise enough to spray grit across the toe. He did not react for 2 full seconds. Then he moved a great deal very fast in no particular direction, stumbling backwards, shouting something she could not resolve at this distance. The 2 on the northern approach broke immediately, running hard for the fence. The 1 working the wire went completely flat. She nodded that the man on the ground was the smart one. He had understood by instinct that the shot had come from elevation and that running upright was the wrong response. She acknowledged the tactical read and adjusted. She fired twice, 1.2 seconds between rounds, both into the earth 2 meters ahead of the running men, with precision that stopped them as completely as a wall. The pasture went very quiet. "Do not move," she said, flat and clear and carrying easily across 300 meters of still air. "You are all on camera. Your vehicles are on camera. You cannot locate my position from where you are standing. You cannot reach the fence line before I can address the attempt. Stay where you are, hands where I can see them." Cutter Briggs was breathing hard. She could see it at this range. "Who?" he started. She held the scope on him and said nothing. There was a moment she had been present for versions of it in alleyways in Mosul, and on mountain roads in northern Syria, and once in a stairwell in a building whose coordinates she would carry tattooed in her skin for the rest of her life, where a man who has always operated without consequence performs a rapid internal calculation about whether the thing pointing at him is real, whether the person behind it has limits that can be found and tested, whether the situation contains an exit not yet identified. She watched Cutter run that calculation. She knew exactly what she had: her position, her sight lines, her remaining rounds, the temperature, the wind, the range to each of the 4 men in the pasture, the minutes until Warren's vehicle would appear at the county road. She had operated in worse conditions, with less certainty, and brought everyone home. She settled her breathing to a 4 count and waited. "On your knees," she said. "All 4, now." Cutter went down, one at a time. The others followed. She held the ridge. She watched. She did not move until she heard tires on the county road and the sweep of headlights came through the east gate and crossed the pasture, and the 4 men turned their faces away from the light. She came off the ridge in the dark, moving without illumination, and reached Ellis Warren's position 3 minutes after he did. He stood looking at the men on their knees in the pasture, then at the rifle in her hands, then at her. "Nora," he said, "I have approximately 4 hours of camera footage from tonight," she said, "and 3 seasons of time-stamped activity from the trail cameras I installed 2 weeks ago. I will transfer everything to you by morning." He was quiet for a moment. "Then, you knew exactly when they were coming." "Yes. You called me 40 minutes before they reached the fence line. I needed time to get into position." "You put 3 shots in the dirt," he said. "In the dark, all 3 in the dirt." She did not answer. He unclipped the cuffs from his belt. Cutter looked up then, not at Warren, at Nora. "You have no idea what you've started," he said. The easy manner was entirely gone. His voice was flat and stripped of everything it had been that first morning at her fence. "You've been poaching on my property for 4 years," she said. "I have your vehicles entering this land on 14 separate occasions, on camera. I have GPS coordinates of the locations where you field-dressed animals taken illegally from my land. I have tonight's entry on 3 cameras with full facial resolution." She held his gaze. "I also know that your cousin sits on the County Planning Commission and that you operated here freely because nobody believed anyone was going to buy this property and stay." A moment passed. "I bought it," she said, "and I'm staying." Warren put the handcuffs on Cutter's wrists with the quiet efficiency of a man who has done this long enough that it requires no performance. He worked through the others one at a time. When the last of them was loaded and the vehicle's taillights had disappeared down the county road, the silence that settled over the property was total and undisturbed. Nora stood in the east pasture in the dark. She could see the ponderosa pines on the north slope, the fence line she had rebuilt post by post with her own hands, the limestone ridge where she had lain in 28-degree air for 45 minutes and waited for the conditions to arrive. She looked up. The sky above the high desert was the kind Dale Stokes had always described, the kind that only exists far from anything built. A depth of stars so complete it doesn't feel like distance, but like the sky has come all the way down to meet the ground, like you were standing inside something rather than beneath it. He would have loved this place. She thought, "I'll make something of this. Something worth making. For both of us." She slung her rifle, walked back across the pasture in the dark, latched the east gate, and went to bed. She slept well. It was the first time she had slept well in longer than she cared to measure. By morning, the story had moved through the county, the way things move through small, close counties, without announcement and without anyone being able to explain the precise route it traveled, but fully present at the feed store and the diner by the time the first ranchers sat down with their coffee. The broad lines of it were already settled. Cutter Briggs had been arrested on the Harmon place. The woman who bought it had been waiting for him in the dark, in position on the ridge, and she had put 3 rounds in the dirt in the night air with a precision that left no room for misreading what she could have done instead. Gil Pruitt stopped by mid-morning with a box of fence staples. He set it on the porch rail, nodded at her once, and got back in his truck without saying much. Martha Keel at the diner sent a lemon meringue pie with no note attached. The State Wildlife Enforcement Division called requesting her camera records for a broader investigation into a poaching operation that had, it turned out, been running across 3 separate properties in the county for the better part of 5 years. She gave them everything she had, organized by date and GPS coordinate. Cutter Briggs never set foot on her property again. Neither did his crew. Neither did anyone in the county who had heard the story and understood it clearly, and everyone heard it. And everyone understood that the East Pasture was quiet that November. The deer came through the ponderosa pines on the north slope the way they always had, unhurried, moving in the old patterns, crossing the land as though they understood that someone was here now who intended to keep it the way it was meant to be kept. There are places that give up on people after people give up on them. They go to seed. They go silent. They wait, sometimes for years, sometimes for longer, for the right person to come along and sign the deed and get to work before dawn. And then sometimes that person arrives. Nora Vance did not buy that ranch to prove anything to anyone. She bought it because somewhere beneath everything the service had built into her and everything grief had taken out, she still believed that land worth caring for was worth fighting for. She was above all other things someone who understood the difference between the fight that needs to be loud and the fight that only needs to be precise. She had spent 11 years being precise. She had not forgotten how. She did not need the county to understand her. She needed the fence posts to hold. They held.